In this lesson, we're going to look at the different parts of the cell. To start with, we can look at these cheek cells, which are animal cells, and you can see that they're stained. You have the cell membrane and the nucleus. If we think of cells in the different parts, we can think of them just like a factory. Every part of the factory has a specific job so that it keeps it running smoothly. If we look at what a cell actually is, we consider it the basic unit of a living organism. And organisms can just be one cell, and they're called unicellular, such as a paramecium or an amoeba. And cells are made up of different organelles, which are parts of the cell that have specific functions. And if we look at the size of cells, we have a bacterium cell, which is here, and then we have an animal cell, which is a little bigger, and then the plant cell, which is bigger than that. Cell theory states that all living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of life, and cells only come from other pre-existing cells, just like we see here. The first organelle we'll look at is the cell membrane. We call it the fluid mosaic model because it is fluid, it's not stiff, and it's a mosaic. It's got lots of proteins and cholesterol and phospholipids embedded into it to make it just like a mosaic piece of art. We also call the cell membrane the plasma membrane or the lipid bilayer. It's a bilayer because there are two, one layer up here and one layer down here of these phospholipids. It allows molecules to enter and exit the cell based on the size of the molecule. So small molecules can freely pass into and out of the cell. It's said to be semi-permeable. There are also protein receptors that are embedded into the cell membrane, which receive signals that get transmitted inside the cell. And the part of the factory would be the receptionist or the security. Now, security in the sense that it helps regulate by size what goes into and out of the cell, but it does not necessarily keep out bad things if they're small enough to pass through. The next organelle is the cell wall, which we find in plant cells and some bacterium. It's a hard outside layer. There is a cell membrane in plant cells, and you can see that it's right here underneath the cell wall, which is composed of two different layers, and this is made of cellulose, which is hard, helps protect the cell and keep its shape. Next, we have the cytoplasm, which is the liquid between the cell membrane and the nuclear envelope in here. It is mostly water, salts, proteins, and the organelles. And it's like the factory floor because all of the organelles are going to carry out their functions right here. Next, we have the nucleus. It's the chief executive officer of the cell. It's surrounded by a nuclear envelope, which you can see here, and it contains the nucleolus. The nuclear envelope has pores so that molecules can move into and out of it. And the nucleus contains the DNA, which is the genetic information, and it never leaves the nucleus. It's going to be copied into RNA, which is the blueprint, and the DNA is the master copy. The chromatin is the loose form of the DNA, and when it's condensed, it forms these chromosomes, which we can see. If we look a little closer, we have the nucleus and the chromosomes are in there. If we were to take a chromosome apart, because it's just a condensed chromatin, we see that it is wound up DNA. And sections of this DNA code for specific genes. Those genes, in turn, code for a specific protein. The next organelle is the nucleolus, which we find inside the nucleus. It makes ribosomes, which will be shipped into the cell for protein synthesis, and it's the recruitment of workers because the ribosomes would be seen as the workers. If we look at the ribosome, it's two parts. Okay, so we have a small subunit and a large subunit, and its job is to build proteins from amino acids by dehydration synthesis. They may be free-floating in the cytoplasm or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. If we look at the endoplasmic reticulum, the rough ER is rough because it contains ribosomes on the surface. And it's a series of large flattened membranes that fold back and forth on each other and has a very large surface area. And it's like the assembly line or factory floor because the ribosomes are going to manufacture those proteins and they're going to be shipped through these membranes. The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, stretches from the nuclear envelope all the way to the plasma membrane. And then those proteins are going to travel to the Golgi, which are going to then be shipped off. Smooth ER is the maintenance crew of the cell. It's very tubular in appearance, whereas the rough ER is flattened membranes. The smooth ER is tubular, and it's going to produce lipids for the cell membrane, such as phospholipids and cholesterol, and these are going to be transported through the tubes of the smooth ER to the cell membrane so that it can be repaired. The Golgi apparatus, or Golgi body, or just Golgi, um, is the packaging and shipping unit of the cell. It receives proteins that are made by the ribosomes and then packages them into these vesicles, which are these tiny sacs, and then releases the vesicles into the cytoplasm where they're stored and transported out of the cell. You can think of these vesicles as the shipping trucks. The vacuole is the storage room. It stores amino acids until they're needed to make a protein. They also store food, water, and waste. If we look at this paramecium, we see that there's some food vacuoles here. We see a contractile vacuole, which is going to control the amount of water that's in the cell. There's waste vacuoles, which will then combine with the cell membrane to be excreted from the cell. And there's also a large central vacuole in plant cells, which helps the cell keep its shape. Lysosomes are the maintenance crew inside the cell. They contain powerful digesting enzymes that break down bacteria and worn out organelles in a cell. Without them, the cell would accumulate too much junk and not be able to function because all those bad organelles and debris would take up room that the cell needs in order for protein synthesis to take place. Next, we have the cytoskeleton. We look at the microfilaments and the microtubules. And the cytoskeleton is like the walls, floors, and ceilings of the factory. Just like our skeleton helps support us, think of cyto, meaning cell, and skeleton for support. It's going to do the same for the cell through these protein fibers. And it also serves as a track for organelles to move along. If we look at the mitochondria, we look at it as the generator of the factory. Sometimes we call it the mighty mitochondria or the powerhouse of the cell. And it's going to convert glucose, of course in the presence of oxygen, into usable energy for the cell called ATP, which is a process called cellular respiration. And the structure of the mitochondria helps increase the surface area for these reactions to take place by having this inner membrane that's really folded up. And these folds right here are called the cristae. The chloroplast is found only in plant cells, and it's like the solar panels for the plant. It's going to convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen, which is the process of photosynthesis. Here we can see a picture of Elodea under the microscope, and you see all these little green dots, and those are the chloroplasts in the cell, and they have a square kind of shape because of the cell wall. And if we look at a chloroplast a little closer, we can see that it's got a double membrane, and then it has all these little discs, kind of like pancakes, that are called thylakoids. The stacks of thylakoids are called the granum. And inside the chloroplast, there is also a liquid medium called stroma. The last organelle we're going to talk about is the centrioles, and the centrioles are only found in animal cells. They function during cell reproduction, and they aid in spindle formation. And this is a spindle here, where the centromeres that are attached to the chromosomes are going to attach and they'll be pulled apart. So one set goes into one cell and one set is going to go to the other cell. And you can see that the centriole structure, it's made up of lots of these microtubules and put into this shape, and each cell has two.